Looked at the women's door and saw the women's sign there. Didn't go in. But anyway, the men's to the right, women's to the left. Okay, coffee, critical, over there. Snacks. And then I'm going to ask you to silence your phones.
There you go. Good reminder.
Yeah. Okay. First thing we're going to do is cover introductions, okay? I'm going to ask you to cover that. Let me start again. I'm going to ask for three things. Number one, your name. Number two, what your position normally is in the community. And then the third thing is the role you played during the emergency situation, during that 1 week. So I'm going to start off with Sarah.
I think you'll know me, Sarah Ultimus Pope. Normally, I'm the coordinator for the Southern Willamette Forest Collaborative, and during the disaster response, I volunteered to be a volunteer coordinator. And just because I've experienced in ICS through my previous work as a wildland firefighter. And thank you all for being here today.
Chrissy Hollett. I guess involvement in the community for the last 12 years has been public safety, and so my role really was PIO for the event, but my current title is City Councilor.
Scott Hollett. I work for the fire department in charge of EMS operations, and I helped with EMS operations during the emergency.
I'm Dawn Kenyon. I'm just a citizen, I hate that word. I'm a citizen of Oak Ridge, and I just helped out during the storm in the last few days when I was not working down in the valley, just taking things to people or places that needed it.
Dennis Shorn, pastor of First Baptist. We kind of got thrust into it at the very beginning with the kids coming from First Baptist Church, and then from that point, after they were here about 48 hours, just continuing on in the community, providing the distance as best we possibly could. And it was a lot of work, but a lot of fun. Actually, it was tiring too.
I'm Kent Dockery, pastor of Lutheran Church here in town. Just help out wherever they needed me to do. I do coordinate the warming center under normal circumstances. You guys had others that were going on at that time, but I helped with those too.
Kevin Goldman, I'm part of the Planning Commission, and during the disaster, I was working with the Red Cross and the First Baptist Disaster Relief Organization during meetings at the high school.
Kathy Kammer, I'm the Family Resource Center, well, not the only, and I was stuck on hyper. So I basically was no help to anyone.
Though the FRC was a big help.
Yeah, that's right.
My name is Janet Hansen. I'm of Oak Ridge. I was stuck in Crestwell, and I'm a marketing specialist, so if this committee needs that kind of work, I can do that.
My name is Elizabeth Dyer. I've been here about 2 years, and I worked at Postal Pharmacy during the storm as a technician.
I'm Kathy Holston. I'm the mayor, and so I'm not sure what purpose I serve other than standing in front of cameras. I'm going to make sure that you're going to know what direction we're going in, learn what a lot of acronyms meant, like PIO officer, and I said, that's not very nice to say that about yourself. She goes, well, that's a public information officer. So we worked hard, we learned a lot, and I'm glad that I went as well as I did.
I'm Vicki Bates, born and raised in Oak Ridge, Oregon, and I'm also part of the parent-teacher organization at the school district, and we supplied hundreds of dollars worth of supplies for the people coming in for our breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and I was there for the 4 days serving with the Red Cross, and I work for the school district.
Neil Rick, I work for the police department, assisted fire department, and handled police levels during the incident.
My name is Rita Doland. I'm the superintendent in the Oak Ridge School District, and I served in that capacity during the emergency. We coordinated with the Red Cross, who came in and opened up a place for people to stay. I also coordinated with ODE and USDA Food Service to bring in emergency food or extra food for us. We used our food stores in our school lunch program to be able to provide lunches, breakfast, lunch, and dinner at the school. And I want to thank both of these great people and the Baptist Church who brought in a crew from to run the kitchen for us to prepare those meals. And that's about it. We got the school open and few people.
I'm Vanessa Osborne. I'm part of the custodial team with the school district, and I was there doing whatever we asked me to do: shovel snow, take out trash, clean up, get people in, get the word out when we have time for whatever.
And the generators now.
My name is Trisha Maxfield. During the winter storm, my capacity was running the community fiber program, which is kind of what I do in my normal independent contractor work through the good companies with smoke mitigation coordinator here in Oak Ridge. I'm also a city councilor, so it's kind of playing in that capacity as well and assisting wherever needed with volunteers or anything of that nature.
So
and my name's
Alan. I actually need to say something to the community. Because we now have a quorum in this room, I just want to remind you that we have 4 public elected officials. I am here as a capacity as a mayor. The others are here in their capacity as they served in the emergency response. That is the direction of the discussion that we are going to be in, and will not stray off that into city policies and planning.
Thank you, Kathy.
Can I add to that, Kathy? I'm actually here in my capacity
Yes.
with Senior Disability Services.
Yeah, we're going to ask 3 things. Number 1, your name. Number 2, what you normally do. Number 3, what role you play during the emergency.
Okay.
Yeah.
So my name is Bobby Whitney. I work for Senior Disability Services. I am the area coordinator for Oak Ridge, and I cover through Pleasant Hill. So I do a lot of the community service related stuff that has to do with Senior Disability Services and also Older Americans Act. So I happen to have access to a list of a lot of my clients through Senior Disability Services that were also case managed clients that we could use to help us in our efforts. So through the incident, I helped coordinate well checks and just following up on folks that were high risk and that really needed some help. So.
Okay, and my name's Alan Rhodes. My role here is as a facilitator. Before I retired, one of my classes was community facilitation. I really liked it. I've been doing community mediations for the past 8 years, but decided I want to get back into community facilitation. Checked with the Forest Resource Council, because I used to be a forester, and then Sarah asked me to help out with this meeting today, so this is my reintroduction to community facilitation. And good training because cameras make me very nervous. I went to one training session where they recorded me and I panicked, and it was awful. Anyway, so again, good experience. I'm going to read this verbatim as to why we're here today. I really like these words that Sarah wrote. Today we will use different methods for gaining perspective on what we learned during the Oak Ridge winter response. Our intent remains the same, to capture the lessons learned in responding to this event so that we may apply our best practices when participating in similar future events. I talked to Sarah, well, a bunch of us got together on Tuesday, and it's not a question of if something like this is going to happen again, it's when something like this happens again in Oak Ridge. So, in order to be better prepared next time. Okay, and Sarah brought up the agenda, okay. Sarah's going to cover a overview of the AAR process. And then, well, we're going to start off with Kathy making an opening remark, then we go to Sarah covering the AAR process. Okay, Sarah's going to introduce group sessions with quick break. Okay, I want to emphasize quick break. And then we're going to break down to the work group sessions. There are going to be 4 of them: Emergency Response Planning Management Team, High School Red Cross, Faith Community Support, and Medical Services and Well Checks. Those may be changed based on Sarah's thoughts, but okay. And then we'll get together, report what those breakout groups learned, discussion, prioritize recommendations, and then review, wrap up, and next steps. Any questions about that? Okay, in this case, I'm going to turn it over to Kathy for opening remarks.
Well, thank you everybody for coming. I just want to start out by saying that while as a community, I know that we responded well, and I'm really proud of everybody, and I know each and every one of you are proud of your neighbors and your friends and family who responded so well. I also want to point out that we dodged a bullet in this. It could have gone south and lasted much longer than it did if the weather hadn't cooperated the way it did, which was I am very grateful for. And I think it's really important that we remember, as we talk today, that while we all have our own personal stories about what happened and how we interacted with others and how others reached out to us, the purpose of this is to coalesce those experiences, to give us an opportunity to share what we think as a community we can do better. I hope that you all have had an opportunity to talk with your friends and family about your individual experiences, because that's an important part of going through this process, and I'm sure that you all have. So just a reminder that the focus is what can we do better in the future and what did we learn from what happened. I just also want to say that this is a group of community volunteers, and you were asked to come to this because you did volunteer at least 2 days or were involved in headwise knowledge of what was happening, or like CAC, you have fingers in everything, it seems like, that I turn around. Oh, CAC would know. Well, CAC's up at High Prairie. So your information is vital too as to what happened in your areas. So I just want to say that as you bring that information together, the survey that went out earlier allowed the community to express how they felt about that. You as volunteers, we want to know, feet on the ground, what happened, what could be better, what do you envision for future emergencies that we might have, and also to assure you that the city itself, their department sat down and reviewed how they performed, and I have some information to share with you that they've come up with as far as not individual pieces, but what they're going to do to be better trained, and what will happen in the near future as far as an emergency. I think they're putting together an emergency preparedness fair in June for the community to help each community member identify how to be prepared for an emergency personally, how to be prepared as a neighborhood, and then how we prepare as a community. So, welcome, and thank you very much for being here.
Okay, so I'm going to talk through the after action review process so everyone understands what we're going through today. And Dawn, I do see that you're recording, and I think it's great if you want to record through the process, but once we get into discussions in plenary, I'm going to ask that you not record. Sure. I want everybody to feel comfortable to self-critique and critique in a way that's positive for us going forward, and being recorded I think makes people feel a little bit nervous about just being open and honest. We really want to have people be really open and honest and transparent during this, so we can get the best lessons learned out of this response. So the after action review, what is it? It's a professional discussion of a response focused on performance, procedures, and process, a review of what happened and why, and identify ways to sustain strengths and improve weaknesses for future responses. And the after action review process is something that comes from both the military and emergency response services. Forest Service uses it a lot in wildfire response, and we're using a little bit of adapted Forest Service ICS AAR process. So what does it entail? A reflection on what happened, identification of key issues, and thorough recommendations to identify lessons learned and capture learning that could be improved for responses next time and in the future. The elements of the AAR is to focus on the key issues, conducted in a non-judgmental and safe environment, inclusive process, so all levels are represented. So this is actually, like Kathy said, we did the community survey, the city is doing an internal type of review, and this is the volunteer community review, and we're hoping that at some level, either at the county or maybe at the city, there'll be an interagency review, because there's a lot of agencies involved in this process. And it builds on shared understanding of the response and carried out as close to the response as possible, and then the learning feeds directly back into action. The outcomes are improved decision-making, better communication and understanding, and improved procedures and practices for the future. And so the review process itself is the survey, and then this is an after-action review workshop. Sometimes there's multiple workshops. And then from this workshop, there will be an after-action review report that will highlight the recommendations that you guys come up with today. And then from that report, the recommendations truly turn into taskers or assignments that that get either embedded in a response plan or future exercises or whatever it is we decide is a way that we are better prepared in the future. Any questions about that before I move on about the process and the products that will come of it? Okay, what I'm going to do right now is do an overview of the survey. And one of the things I want to be transparent about is the survey only went out online. So we know that's a limited portion of our community that probably got the survey or was able to take it. And really that's based more on time more than anything, is trying to get some results in time. That being said, we had 136 responses, so I feel that is a good cross-representation, though I did pull out a few comments that maybe highlight what people who don't have access to internet through their phones or computers at home or whatnot, some of their concerns. So I do want us to keep that in mind as we're talking about things today, is maybe some of the community members that aren't responding or aren't represented here. Though I have to say, I'm really impressed with the cross section of folks that we have here. I think it's going to enable us to have a really good conversation and cover a lot of bases. So most of the people that took the survey were from Oak Ridge and Westford and the surrounding area, which would be High Prairie. Someone must have self-selected Brock Road. This question was important to us because in this response, and I didn't have time, I was going to work in some pictures. I mean, you guys lived it, but it's pretty impressive when you go back and look on the history of our, the visuals of what happened here. But everybody knows we were completely shut down without power, and our traditional communication methods, the radio repeater up on High Prairie was down. I was eventually able to get KLCC, but the radio wasn't reliable. So really, communications that happened during the response were by the select few who were lucky enough to have Verizon cell phones. Mm-hmm. So we did know that. So that was one of the questions we want to ask is, how did you receive most of your information? Now, this is a little bit, I want you to remember the context. This is people who took this survey online. So they, most people are saying Facebook here. So the numbers truly might be a little bit different. But we do know that Facebook was an effective method of getting information out to people. The next way that people learned was word of mouth. And so I'm sure there's some lessons learned around that about, word of mouth, in a disaster like this is how people are going to get the information. So how you make sure good information gets out. And then the rest was a mix of our information boards, radio news, family, and then a whole list of just onesies or twosies that people came up with. But mostly Facebook and word of mouth. So we wanted to know how people felt about being prepared. Was your household adequately prepared for emergency of this type? And 56% of the folks said yes, and 44% said no.
So we don't know if they're saying food or water, electricity, alternative diesel, those separate.
Yeah, no, we pumped it all together.
Yeah,
and we do have one more question on that, is how many days were you prepared for? And so the majority of days that folks were prepared for was, I think together 2 to 2.5 days is the most. There were some folks that were prepared, 19 people were prepared for between 10 and 21 days, so maybe a couple of weeks. And so that's good to know. There is a community of people in town that do think, have that long-term preparedness. But yeah, how do we pull from some of the lessons that these people know about being prepared for that long down to the rest of the community that's down here in a couple of days? And I know I was guilty of that too. I will definitely keep fuel at my house from now on, because you never know. We were curious about some of the things that were out there as far as the warming center, how many days people used it. People that took this survey, not really, most people didn't use the warming centers, but we do have numbers on warming centers and how many people were at them each day. And then we were curious about damage. Did people sustain damage? And about 50% of people, well, actually, am I reading this wrong? Oh, that's the number that took it. So maybe about a third of people did have some damage, a little bit of business, but again, we don't know how many people actually were exposed to the survey, but there was some damage that was sustained. and the services you received. So we were kind of trying to get a count of how people were getting their services. And so on this count, some of the volunteer services we offered were being used. So the warm meals at the high school, and the Methodist Church also for a couple of days was offering warm meals. The WAC Distribution Center, the food pantry, community firewood program, wellness checks, some folks getting that from the city itself, city emergency services, the churches, and then there on the other, see the 8 comments, I actually tried to fold those back into here where they would fit, because sometimes people just want to write instead of put it in a category. Assistance from a neighbor was our highest count, 41% of folks, which is amazing, and that's what I saw when I was out there going house to house too, checking on some of my clients, is that neighbors were helping neighbors, which is great, but how going forward, what are some of the lessons learned, how we support our community, help each other, so, and be better prepared to do so. Okay, so then here's some comments that I pulled that I thought were kind of interesting. So this was just a general comment space. So during the emergency, we relied on Facebook to know about gas and propane availability, electricity timelines, road openings, which grocery stores were open and the times they were open, but it was all word of mouth and sometimes unreliable. Also, if you didn't have a way to check Facebook, you'd have no way of knowing about these services. We would like the phone number to call for correctly recorded answers for those questions, which is a great idea. And you guys, all of us, we were all doing the best we could do. So please don't be critical of yourselves. I mean, I know, like, even after the fact, as an emergency team member, I was like, why didn't we create an emergency Facebook page? You know, but when you're running and gunning, that stuff is, you're just responding to things as they come to you. So there's lots of great ideas that we want to capture today that maybe we can learn from in the future. So please don't take this as a critique. It's just good information. Next, and I thought this was relevant, I was stuck at home with no heat, light, or food with 2 toddlers, and we could not move our car. We had no way to find help or information and had no cash to get food for the children. Please find a way to reach out to people like us and help us find help. We nearly froze to death and are all traumatized from this. And we actually were trying to reach people, but of course we couldn't reach everybody. So there are still people out there that, you know, that found other ways to get support through this. And that word traumatized is why I pulled this. And in some respects it was traumatic. I mean, there was some suffering that people were experiencing in our community. I went home every night to wood stove, and I knew my kids were at home and warm. And I felt so fortunate having that resource, and a lot of people didn't. Being cold for 3 or 4 or 5 days, especially for vulnerable populations, is a big issue. And so again, I really appreciate everyone being here to spend some time on this stuff today, talking through it. And then last, this was a recommendation just in the general that someone put in. I thought it was good. Emergency supply caches. We were tapping into resources and perhaps pushing the bounds of some of our funding sources in order to procure emergency supplies. We got supplies eventually, but we really needed cache of supplies on hand, emergency meal kits, blankets, batteries, flashlights, basic fuel supply on hand for medical necessity. There are preparedness grants available for precisely this. So this is where we want to get to. You know, this is where we're going today with what we're going to talk about. And it is true. I think probably we were definitely operating in a lot of gray areas and emptying out people's cash supplies that they had through the resources that they offer, which is amazing that our community will step up and do that. But how do we get ourselves in a position that if we know we need to empty supplies, that we know it's okay to do so. We know it's okay to go into the food box and just empty it out. You know, just some of the red tape that we were really concerned about as we were trying to provide these services. How do we find ways in the future to know that the possible red tape truly isn't red tape if you're in an emergency? Because we had a lot of questions we were asking each other as we were doing this stuff. Oh, and then this one. The sheer number of people who stepped up to help others is amazing, and one of the reasons I love this community. So we truly had so many people maybe kind of loosely formalized responding. My list of volunteers is 100 people long. I'm not kidding. That's 100 people that took time to go do something else for someone in the community through all of the services that you guys represent. And then we had all the people that were helping their neighbors. So really people did pull together and help each other out in a really tough situation. And so I really hope that this is one of the big takeaways from this, is that we do have the resources to help each other out in emergencies, whether it be a future fire response or a future Cascadia earthquake or the dam breaking or whatever else. We do need to be prepared to respond, but we have the skills in our community to do it. And now we'll talk about breakouts. We're going to talk about ground rules first, and I'll come back to talking about breakouts.
Yeah.
Or meeting agreements.
Yeah, good punchline. Yeah, I call these things meeting agreements because I'm asking you to agree to the following things. If you don't like them, I'll record changes to this list up here, okay? First thing is focus on what, not the who. Participate, but don't dominate. Be concise. Be open to new ideas. Don't interrupt one another. And we may want to speak, the facilitator will guide you through the discussion. Stay on topic and be present. So, is everybody okay with this? Raise your hand. Okay. So, does anybody want any changes to this? Okay, looks like we're good. Okay, Sarah's going to cover the breakout sessions.
Yeah. So, and let me, okay, so we're going to have 4 different work groups, but let me, I guess, just really quickly talk about how it's going to work. So we're going to break out into work groups and be able to do small group brainstorming and discussion. And from that, you're going to come up with recommendations that are coming out of your discussion for the area that you're in, and be reporting those either on paper or on the flip chart and reporting those back out. Then we're going to come back together as an entire group in a plenary session and share what our individual groups have, look at it as a whole, and then as a large group, prioritize those recommendations that come out of that. I want to let you know that just because if you have a recommendation you feel strongly about and it doesn't rise to the top with how everybody in the group votes on it, doesn't mean it gets lost. In the final report, all recommendations go into it. We just push the ones that everybody agreed on to the top, and those get highlighted. But we don't want to lose anything that people talk about. So there's several different ways to share information today. Definitely in our small groups and then in the plenary discussion. But we also have sticky notes on each one of the tables. So if something that we didn't have time to get to, or if you feel like it's kind of a small detail and a one-off, you can write that on that and put it in the parking lot, and we'll save it for later and work that into the report. And then when you're in your small groups, there's also note cards there. If you have a longer comment you'd like to say or something you want to come back to, write it on a note card. I didn't have it in the PowerPoint, but another part of this process of developing the report is we can do individual interviews. So timing-wise, we haven't had time to do that beforehand, but we can come back around. So if you want to be interviewed or you think there's someone that needs to be interviewed, let us know. And I guess I forgot to mention before, we also have 2 University of Oregon interns who are supporting us through this process. One's at another conference today, and the other one got sick this morning, but they're going to be helping us write the after-action report, compiling a survey report, and then if we do an interagency after-action review, helping us through that. So we do have some additional staff help. Okay, so that was me getting off my agenda, but let me look back at this. Okay, so the work groups I have, we kind of came up with knowing who we invited, but we can change this, so I want to ask you guys, so we have the emergency response team, so the folks that were...
Can you pull those up on the board?
I think that, yeah,
okay.
oops. I can actually go back to this intro slide. It's on your agendas too, so.
Yeah, just take a look at your agendas. It's going to probably be for the floor.
So, and I somehow messed up cutting and pasting. The lessons learned for future response planning is what everybody is working on. But so there's emergency response team, so kind of the folks that were centered at the fire hall or closely supporting that. Here we have High School Red Cross Warming Center and Hot Meals. So kind of the folks that were centered at the school, there was a lot of activity there. The faith community support, there was different things going on at different churches. And I definitely wanted to give those members time to get together and talk if they wanted to. And then medical services and well checks, which were combined together. And I was hoping we'd have a little more representation from clinics, but I knew Lori couldn't be here today and some of the other folks. We might fold that into our interagency response, because there was some really important lessons learned from that. But I still think it's really relevant for it to come up today because it was pretty impressive how Postal Pharmacy and our clinic stepped up and provided services. So we don't want to lose some of those lessons learned. But that being said, we can combine some of this. So, and you guys can self-select where you want to go. So whatever you feel comfortable. But I was wondering, should we combine Faith Community and the Warming Center, since you guys were kind of doing both the same things?
I'll give them the opportunity to choose where they want to go.
Yeah, okay, we can do that. So if we end up with just a few, we were hoping a couple more pastors could make it, but some things came up. So if you get in there and it's just a few folks, if you feel like you can still be productive and you really want to go through everything, great. But if you guys want to choose to go somewhere else, that'd be fine too. But yeah, I was just thinking the Warming Center and Hot Meals are faith groups, dentists such as the Baptist Church, you guys were doing. That's the services you were providing too. Yeah.
Food service fit.
Yeah, so they can fit together. So then let me talk about. Oh, I did it again. Sorry. Might be something important in this slide. Probably not, but we'll check it. Okay, so yeah, 4 different work groups. Pick your work group based on interest. We may need to move people for balance. That's what I was just getting at. So goals of the work group. So to achieve consensus on the issue and rewrite and clarify if needed. And that's really the recommendations. So you will be asked to report out at the end. Write up the 3 actionable recommendations. If you come up with more, you come up with more, but let's try and shoot for a targeted number. You know, a laundry list would be kind of hard to sort through. And appoint a speaker to present your issue and recommendations at the end. You know what? Sorry, the issue language, disregard that. It's really more about what recommendations are. So at each table, and I'll tell you where the breakout sessions are in a second here. So you'll see an agenda for your for the work group, and you're going to have, what is it, 50 minutes to talk. And we're a little bit ahead of schedule, so you might actually have an hour to talk in your small groups. And so the agenda is to review key areas of success and opportunities for improvement. So it's also really important to record something that was really successful. There was a lot of amazing things happen. Let's not lose that, because that'll help feed into our final report. And opportunities for improvements. Identify root causes of what worked and what it didn't. And that's a little bit that forward thinking is, if something didn't work well, what's that root cause that turns into a recommendation for us to improve for next time? Develop recommendations to enhance future performance, and then prioritize 3 recommendations to present in the plenary group. And then there's a little bit more instruction on here, but at each table you'll have a flip chart and note cards, so whatever you guys feel comfortable in recording, but you are going to present at the end, so if you do at least want to get your final recommendations up on a flip chart to present to everybody, that'd be helpful for the plenary discussion. And then there's sticky dots, so if you're a group that ends up with, you know, a flip chart of 15 different options, you can use the sticky dots, give 3 to each person, and then wherever it ends up with the most dots, or just circle and ask and whatnot. But I'll leave it to you guys to self-sort that. We will send Alan to the group that seems to be the largest, and he can help with the flip charting. And otherwise, you'll have to kind of self-select facilitators or note takers or report out folks in your groups. Does that make sense? Is there any questions?
Well, I think I'd like to just mention to everybody that as you're in your groups talking about what your kind of generally specific purpose is while we want you to focus on that, don't be afraid if you also veer off into some other area that isn't particularly, you know, food service and the warming center, but because the discussion moves and says this is how we interacted or could have interacted, should have interacted, would like to have, that type of thing. It's okay to begin to record that too, because we all are going to come back together again. And if that doesn't get brought up, then you'll have already recorded that and can bring it up too. So, you know, don't feel like you're locked into a silo.
Yeah, so Kathy, I think that's a great point. There are cross-cutting themes that we experience, such as communications, the cross-cutting theme that affected every area we were working in, or even support from outside world is a cross-cutting theme. So yeah, if those themes, they impacted your ability to respond, definitely feel free to make it about that. I mean, it's whatever you guys as a group are feeling is rises to the top is really a priority issue and recommendation.
I just want to make a quick side comment here too. This may seem a little bit overwhelming. You know, there is a step-by-step process. So, you know, if nothing else, the very first thing you should do is just make sure you understand the process and come to consensus on that, and then go ahead and start working your way down this list of things. I know the first time I went to a meeting like this, I was like, oh. So.
Yep, I think so. I really appreciate that. Okay, so for our areas, we have in here is a small breakout room, and there's another small breakout room over there. We set up a table over here and a table over here. So let's do something like number one. Let's do the emergency response team. Let's put them in here. High School Red Cross and Warming Center meals here. Faith group and community support in that back room, and medical services and well checks over here. I should have wrote on the flip charts. There's always something we forget. Do you guys know where you're going? Do you know where you're